0327 hours, Caracas time. Armored vehicles surround Miraflores Presidential Palace. Helicopters circle overhead. Elite military units breach the compound. Nicolas Maduro is detained by his own generals. The coup succeeds in 14 minutes. By 0400 hours, Venezuela has new military government. By 0600 hours, Cuba mobilizes forces. By 0800 hours, China issues ultimatum. By 1000 hours, American warships receive deployment orders. What started as internal Venezuelan power struggle becomes international crisis, threatening to ignite regional war. This is how regime change triggers conflict nobody planned, but everyone gets dragged into. Hour by hour, decision by decision, escalation by escalation. The coup wasn't spontaneous. It was planned for 8 months. Senior Venezuelan military officers grew increasingly frustrated with Maduro's government. Economic collapse destroyed military readiness. Soldiers go unpaid for months. Equipment sits broken for lack of parts. Fuel shortages ground aircraft. Food shortages affect military families. The professional military watched their institution degrade, while Maduro maintained power through political loyalty rather than competence. General Roberto Guzmán, commander of Strategic Operational Command, organized the conspiracy. He recruited 12 senior officers. They controlled 40,000 troops between them. More importantly, they controlled units stationed in Caracas. Geography determines coup success. Control the capital, and you control the country. The final decision came after fraudulent election in July. Opposition candidate Maria Corina Machado won with 67% according to exit polls. Official results gave Maduro 51%. The fraud was blatant. International observers denounced the results. Street protests erupted. Maduro's forces killed 23 protesters in 2 days. That violence crossed line for military officers who still retained professional ethics. General Guzmán made his decision. The government must go. If civilian opposition cannot remove Maduro through elections, military must remove him through force. The planning accelerated. Target date set for October 15th. Time was necessary to coordinate units and ensure simultaneous action across multiple locations. The operation began at exactly 0315 hours. Special Forces units moved to pre-positioned locations around Presidential Palace. Communications were severed to prevent Maduro from calling loyal units. Electricity to the palace was cut. Backup generators activated, but that bought only minutes. At 0327 hours, explosives breached the palace gates. 50 operators entered the compound. Presidential Guard numbered 200 personnel, but most were sleeping. Those who resisted were neutralized. Maduro was located in residential quarters at 03 to 34 hours. He was detained without injury. By 0341 hours, the operation was complete. Venezuela had new government. General Guzmán would serve as president of transitional military junta until elections could be organized. The coup was bloodless, only 3 casualties, all Presidential Guard personnel who opened fire before being ordered to stand down. What's your prediction for how this unfolds? Type A if you think transition is peaceful, type B if you think international conflict erupts. 400 hours. General Guzmán addresses the nation via all television and radio channels. Military has taken control to restore constitutional order. Maduro's government was illegitimate. The July election was stolen. Venezuela will hold new elections within 6 months, supervised by international observers. All political prisoners will be released. Economic reforms will begin immediately. The military pledges to return to barracks once democratic government is elected. The speech is professional. Guzmán emphasizes this is not military dictatorship. This is transitional arrangement to restore democracy. International reaction will determine whether anyone believes him. 0415 hours. Cuban government receives news of the coup. Havana has 20,000 personnel in Venezuela. Doctors, teachers, security advisors. But the security advisors are Cuban intelligence officers. They've been training Venezuelan counterintelligence and internal security forces for 20 years. Cuban investment in Venezuelan regime is enormous. Maduro's fall threatens Cuban interests. More concerning, successful coup in Venezuela might inspire similar action in Cuba. The regime cannot allow Venezuelan coup to succeed. President Miguel Diaz-Canel convenes Emergency National Defense Council meeting. Discussion focuses on options for reversing the coup. Military intervention is possible. Cuba has limited force projection capability, but Venezuela is only 1,600 miles away. More realistic is supporting Maduro loyalists to launch counter-coup. Cuban intelligence identifies Venezuelan military units that might remain loyal to Maduro. Plans are made to contact these units and provide support. 0445 hours. Chinese ambassador to Venezuela is woken with news. Beijing has $60 billion invested in Venezuela. Chinese oil companies operate in Venezuelan fields. Chinese military has advisors in country. Chinese satellite ground stations require Venezuelan cooperation. The coup threatens all of this. More importantly, the coup sets precedent. If military coups can remove Chinese-friendly governments, then Chinese investments worldwide are vulnerable. Beijing cannot accept this precedent. Ambassador immediately contacts Foreign Ministry. The message goes up chain to Politburo Standing Committee. President Xi Jinping is briefed at 5:30 hours Beijing time. His response is unambiguous. The coup is unacceptable. China will not recognize military junta. China demands Maduro's restoration. Chinese ambassador will demand meeting with coup leaders to deliver ultimatum. If you're enjoying this deep dive into modern warfare, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. 0500 hours. Russian Foreign Ministry issues statement condemning the coup. Moscow has sold Venezuela $11 billion in weapons since 2005. Russian military advisors train Venezuelan forces. Russian oil companies operate in Venezuela. Russian strategic interests are threatened by regime change. But Russia's response is more measured than China's. Moscow has experience with coups and understands military transitions. Russia will wait to see if new government maintains commercial relationships. If General Guzmán promises to honor existing contracts, Russia might accept the transition. But if the new government moves toward United States, Russia will support counter-coup attempts. For now, Russia issues diplomatic condemnation while quietly assessing whether the new government can be worked with. 0530 hours. Washington receives confirmation of the coup through embassy reporting and intelligence channels. The situation creates immediate dilemma. American policy has been regime change in Venezuela for years. Sanctions aimed to create conditions for exactly this outcome. But military coup is not democratic transition. Supporting military junta contradicts American values. But opposing the coup means defending Maduro, which is politically impossible. State Department crafts careful statement. United States notes the change in government. We call for rapid transition to democratic elections. We will assess our relationship with Venezuela based on the transitional government's actions. The statement says everything and nothing. It buys time for policymakers to figure out actual response. 0600 hours. Cuban military begins mobilization. Revolutionary armed forces activate reserve units. Aircraft are armed and fueled. Naval vessels prepare for sea. The mobilization is defensive officially. But Cuba is positioning forces for potential operations in Venezuela. Transport aircraft could carry Cuban special forces to Venezuela within hours. The force would be small, but potentially decisive if it links up with Maduro loyalists. Cuba is gambling that rapid action might reverse the coup before international recognition makes the new government legitimate. The window is narrow. Act now or accept the coup as permanent. 0630 hours. General Guzmán receives Chinese ambassador. The meeting is tense. Ambassador delivers Beijing's message. China does not recognize the military junta. China demands Maduro's immediate release and restoration to power. China will use all available means to ensure its interests are protected. The threat is barely veiled. Guzmán responds calmly. Venezuela values its relationship with China. All existing contracts will be honored. But Maduro's government was illegitimate and corrupt. The transition is necessary for Venezuela's future. Chinese investments will be secure under new government. Ambassador is unconvinced. He reports back to Beijing that diplomatic pressure is insufficient. Stronger measures are required. Don't miss what comes next. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an analysis like this. 700 hours. Pro-Maduro military units begin resistance. The 41st Armored Brigade, stationed in Maracay, refuses to recognize the junta. Brigade Commander General Luis Torres was personally loyal to Maduro. He declares that the coup is illegal. His brigade will restore constitutional order. The 41st Armored has 80 tanks and 3,000 troops. It's the most powerful ground force unit in Venezuelan military. Torres orders his brigade to advance on Caracas. The civil war has begun. Pro-junta forces must either negotiate with Torres or destroy him. Negotiation seems unlikely. Torres is true believer. He will fight. 7:30 hours. Colombian president receives situation briefing. Bogotá has complicated relationship with Venezuela. Border disputes, refugee flows, drug trafficking. Colombian government officially supports Venezuelan opposition. But military coup creates chaos that might spill across border. Worse, if Cuba intervenes militarily, Colombia must respond. Colombian military is U.S. trained and equipped. Colombia has mutual defense relationship with United States. Cuban forces operating in Venezuela could threaten Colombian security. President orders military to elevated readiness status. Border defenses are reinforced. Intelligence collection intensifies. Colombia will not intervene unless directly threatened. But preparations for intervention begin just in case. 800 hours. Chinese Foreign Ministry holds press conference. Spokesperson condemns the coup in strongest terms. China will not recognize illegal military government. China demands immediate restoration of constitutional order. China reserves the right to take necessary measures to protect its interests and citizens in Venezuela. The language is diplomatic, but the meaning is clear. China is threatening military intervention. The question is whether they're bluffing. China has limited force projection capability in Western Hemisphere. But they don't need massive force. They just need enough to tip balance toward Maduro loyalists. A few hundred special forces flown in on transport aircraft could make the difference. China has the will. The question is whether they have the capability. What would you have done if you were advising General Guzmán at this moment? Comment your answer below. 0830 hours. American intelligence detects Chinese military movements. 2 Y-20 heavy transport aircraft departed Chinese military base near Beijing. Flight path tracks toward Pacific Crossing. These aircraft can carry 66 tons each. That's enough for 200 special forces operators with equipment. Estimated arrival in Venezuela is 18 hours, assuming refueling stops. Pentagon analysts assess the mission. If Chinese special forces arrive in Venezuela and link up with Maduro loyalists, they could reverse the coup. The combination of Chinese military professionalism and Venezuelan heavy armor from 41st Brigade would be formidable. CIA immediately briefs White House. Decision time is arriving faster than anyone expected. Will America allow Chinese military intervention in Western Hemisphere? Monroe Doctrine says no. But enforcing Monroe Doctrine means confronting China militarily. That's World War III scenario. 0900 hours. Cuban transport aircraft depart Havana heading for Venezuela. IL-76 heavy lifters carry 150 Cuban Special Forces personnel. These are Tropas Especiales, Cuba's elite units, combat veterans from Angola and Syria. The mission is to link up with Venezuelan forces loyal to Maduro and provide tactical expertise. The Cubans will advise, not lead. Venezuelan officers will command. But Cuban expertise in urban combat and special operations is significant. Their presence might inspire Maduro loyalists to fight harder. Flight time to Venezuela is 3 hours. Cuban forces will arrive before Chinese forces. The race to influence outcome is accelerating. 09:30 hours. U.S. Navy receives deployment orders. Carrier strike group USS George Washington, operating near Puerto Rico, will steam toward Venezuelan coast. Transit time is 36 hours. The carrier will position 200 miles offshore. Official explanation is protecting American citizens and monitoring the situation. Real purpose is preventing external military intervention. Chinese aircraft approaching Venezuela will be warned away. Cuban aircraft likewise. American carrier air power makes this enforcement credible. FA-18 fighters can intercept any transport aircraft attempting to land in Venezuela. The message is unambiguous. This is Venezuelan internal affair. External military intervention will not be tolerated. America is drawing red line, even though nobody is sure we'll enforce it. This kind of detailed tactical breakdown takes hours to research. Subscribe to help us keep making them. 1,000 hours. Combat begins between pro-junta and pro-Maduro forces. The 41st Armored Brigade reaches outskirts of Caracas. They encounter 23rd Infantry Brigade, loyal to junta. The infantry has anti-tank weapons but limited armored vehicles. Tank warfare in urban terrain favors defenders if they're prepared. But 23rd Brigade wasn't prepared for immediate combat. Torres's tanks overrun their positions. Casualties are heavy on both sides, 127 dead in first 2 hours. This is no longer bloodless coup, this is civil war. Junta forces need reinforcements, but most units are trying to remain neutral. Nobody wants to fight fellow Venezuelans. The indecision paralyzes military effectiveness on both sides. 1100 hours. Cuban aircraft arrive in Venezuela. They land at Maracaibo airfield, controlled by pro-Maduro forces. The 150 Cuban Special Forces immediately deploy to support 41st Brigade. Cuban advisors assess the tactical situation. They recognize that rapid advance on Caracas is critical. Delay allows junta to consolidate power. Cuban commanders urge Torres to press the attack immediately. Venezuelan tanks advance through southern suburbs of Caracas. Junta forces establish defensive lines, but they're disorganized. Civilian casualties mount as fighting spreads through residential areas. International media captures footage of burning buildings and bodies in streets. The coup that was supposed to restore democracy is creating humanitarian catastrophe. 1200 hours. General Guzmán faces strategic crisis. His forces are losing ground. Cuban intervention tipped the balance. If 41st Brigade reaches Presidential Palace, the coup fails. Worse, Guzmán and his co-conspirators will be executed for treason. He faces terrible choice. Accept defeat, fight to the death, or request American military intervention. The third option means Venezuela becomes proxy battleground for great power conflict. But losing means death. Survival instinct is powerful motivation. Guzmán contacts American embassy through secure channel. He requests emergency military assistance. American airstrikes against 41st Brigade column. American special forces to defend key installations. The message is clear. Help us or we die, and Maduro returns to power. 12:30 hours. White House Situation Room is packed. President faces the decision that could define his presidency and possibly trigger World War III. Military options are presented. Option 1. Decline intervention. Let Venezuelan factions fight it out. Risk is Maduro loyalists win, and Chinese influence increases. Option 2. Limited air strikes against 41st Brigade. Stop their advance without committing ground forces. Risk is escalation if Cuban or Chinese forces are hit. Option 3. Full intervention. Deploy airborne troops to secure Caracas and support junta. Risk is massive escalation and potential war with China. None of the options are good. All carry enormous risks. President must decide in minutes because 41st Brigade is advancing, and delay means junta collapse. Your engagement directly shapes what we cover next. Drop a comment and subscribe. 1300 hours. President makes the call. American forces will conduct limited airstrikes against 41st Brigade Armored Column. Rules of engagement prohibit targeting Cuban or Chinese personnel. The strikes aim to stop the advance, not annihilate Venezuelan forces. 2 FA-18 Super Hornets launch from USS George Washington. They carry AGM-65 Maverick missiles designed for anti-armor operations. The aircraft arrive over Caracas at 1320 hours. Pilots identify lead tanks in the column. Missiles away, 6 tanks destroyed in first strike. The column halts. Survivors take cover. Advance is stopped, but Venezuelan forces are not destroyed. American intervention achieved immediate objective without excessive destruction. But it also means America is now party to Venezuelan civil war. There's no walking this back. 1330 hours. Chinese Foreign Ministry issues emergency statement. American military intervention in Venezuela is illegal aggression. China condemns this violation of Venezuelan sovereignty. China will take all necessary measures to assist legitimate Venezuelan government. The language is more aggressive than previous statements. Beijing is signaling that American intervention has consequences. But what can China actually do? They're 10,000 miles away. Their transport aircraft won't arrive for hours. Their special forces would be outnumbered. The situation demonstrates limits of Chinese power projection. They can threaten, they can condemn, but they cannot effectively respond militarily. This is a humiliating lesson for Beijing. American military dominance in Western Hemisphere is absolute. Chinese intervention attempt failed before it began. 1400 hours. Cuban government faces same reality. Cuban special forces in Venezuela are isolated. American air power controls the battlefield. Cuban advisors can help defend positions, but they cannot support offensive operations against American airstrikes. Havana must decide whether to reinforce failure or cut losses. Raul Castro makes the call. Cuban forces will remain defensive. They will protect pro-Maduro positions, but they will not advance. This is not retreat. This is recognition of reality. Cuba cannot defeat American military power. Attempting to do so just gets Cuban soldiers killed without changing outcome. The pragmatic decision is to preserve forces and wait for diplomatic solution. 1430 hours. General Torres receives his own moment of decision. His advance is halted. His tanks are vulnerable to American airstrikes. His options are surrender, retreat, or die fighting. Torres was never a good strategist. He was loyal Maduro supporter who reached high rank through political connections rather than competence. Faced with military defeat, he chooses retreat. The 41st Brigade withdraws from Caracas toward Maracay. American aircraft shadow the withdrawal but do not attack retreating forces. The immediate military crisis is over. Junta control of Caracas is secure. But the broader conflict is just beginning. If you made it this far, you're the core of our community. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell. 1500 hours. International diplomacy shifts into crisis management mode. United Nations Security Council holds emergency session. Russia and China demand condemnation of American intervention. United States vetoes the resolution. Latin American countries are divided. Some support the junta as lesser evil than Maduro. Others condemn military coup and American intervention. Organization of American States cannot agree on statement. The diplomatic paralysis reflects deeper reality. International institutions are inadequate for managing great power conflicts. The situation in Venezuela will be resolved through power, not diplomacy. Power belongs to those who can project military force. In Western Hemisphere, that means America. 1600 hours. The 24-hour assessment reveals new strategic reality. Venezuela has transitional military government backed by United States. Pro-Maduro forces control some territory, but cannot challenge junta militarily. Cuban forces are isolated. Chinese intervention attempt failed. Maduro is detained and will likely face trial. But the underlying problems remain unresolved. Venezuela's economy is still collapsed. Cuban and Chinese investments are threatened. Regional stability is damaged. American military intervention set precedent that might encourage future coups. The coup succeeded militarily, but the aftermath might be worse than the problem it claimed to solve. The international implications ripple outward. China demonstrated it cannot project power into Western Hemisphere. That's strategic victory for United States. But China will remember this humiliation. They will accelerate naval expansion and force projection capabilities. Next time, they won't be caught unable to respond. Cuba learned that its military reach is limited without Russian support. Russia observed American willingness to intervene militarily in hemisphere. That confirms their suspicions about American imperialism. The crisis strengthened narratives each side tells about the other. Venezuelan people face uncertain future. The coup promised democracy, but delivered military government. American intervention secured the junta, but at cost of Venezuelan sovereignty. Economic collapse continues regardless of who governs. Oil production remains depressed. Sanctions may or may not be lifted, depending on transitional governments' behavior. Millions of refugees remain displaced. The humanitarian catastrophe that preceded the coup will likely continue after it. Military intervention changes governments. It rarely solves underlying problems. The detained president sits in military prison contemplating his fate. Maduro probably faces trial for corruption, human rights violations, and electoral fraud. Conviction is certain. Sentence might be prison or exile. Either outcome ends his political career. But his detention created crisis that drew in multiple countries and nearly triggered regional war. One man's detention cascaded into international confrontation between nuclear powers. That's how interconnected modern geopolitics has become. No country is truly isolated. No crisis is purely domestic. Everything affects everything else in ways nobody predicts or controls. The military conflict that erupted from presidential detention demonstrates the unpredictability of regime change. The coup plotters thought they were restoring democracy. They triggered civil war. They forced American military intervention. They humiliated China. They isolated Cuba. They destabilized the region. None of this was intended. All of it was consequence of action, taken with incomplete understanding of ramifications. This is the danger of military solutions to political problems. The military can remove leaders. The military cannot solve the problems that made those leaders possible. Venezuela's president detained. Military conflict erupted. International crisis followed. Great powers confronted each other. The crisis is contained for now. But containment is not resolution. The underlying tensions remain. The competing interests persist. The potential for escalation continues. This is not the end of Venezuela's troubles. This